Actually, just like the old days, Jake's pressed some buttons and a pod full of Saints is back on air. Actually, might not do, but it could get blown away here. Wind's blowing a hoolie up here. Right, talking of hot air, how you doing, Jake?
Ah, hello, Dave. Oh, I've missed you for like the 3 weeks we've had off. It's a shame it's over.
And Lee, what about your good self? How are you doing? You were going to go and enjoy this Bank Holiday Monday at a local hostelry, I believe.
Yeah, I've drunk them all dry, mate, to be fair. Along with Jake, enjoyed the peace and quiet for those 3 weeks. But I guess, yes, it's better the devil that you know, David. So should we crack on, the old fruit?
Well, we got various things to look back on because we've
Have we?
delayed it.
What's
We've
happened?
been, we've been waiting for news from the club, and if we did that, well, we'll have raised the Titanic by the time the next bit of news comes out at the present rate. It's pathetic, a shambles. We'll come on to that later. First bit of news that broke some weeks back was that Ian Culverhouse is staying as manager and Paul Bastock as assistant manager. Now, those of you who saw the interview with poor old Joe on the coach coming back from Truro City after our relegation at Truro, of course, relegation is a word that the club refuses to use in relation to the club. Um, Culverhouse looked resigned to his fate, didn't he? Things he said, he thought he was going that week on the Thursday. So, any idea what has changed for the club to not do that and ask him to stay on, presumably?
Go on, Lee.
Well, I just think you've got to put some context into this, Dave. You've just been relegated. You've just got a spanking as well at the hands of the champions. You're on I don't know, I'm guessing a 4, 5, 6 hour coach drive back to St Albans. You've got Joe putting a microphone and a camera in your face. You're not going to be full of the joys of spring, are you? And I think you're going to be sort of quite demoralised about what's just happened in front of your very, very eyes. Look, there was some murmurings and some musings that the club were looking at a younger manager and they had people interested. And I genuinely believe, I don't think that Ian and Bazza knew their fate. I mean, to be fair, it sounded as though they wanted to stay and finish the job, perhaps, but maybe it was taken out of their hands. Jake, we've discussed this, mate, at great length. It was the talking point. It was, it was after the Lord Mayor's show, wasn't it? We were sort of talking about the first of the news. Will Ian and Bazza stay? Do they want to stay? Is it dependent on what league we're going to be in? And I think the club have made the right decision, or Ian and Bazza have made the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you hinted at earlier, and we didn't really discuss it on the last podcast, that, part of this decision was Ian and Baz's as well, wasn't it? There's no guarantee that they would want to stay at this football club after that season, not knowing what division they were going to be in, possibly in a division they've never managed in before. But I think it was really great to get that announcement. There'd been murmurings, they say, Lee, going one way at one point, suggesting it wasn't looking like they'd be returning. And then we heard some more positive news. And I think it was great to get that announcement. And I'm just glad it came early-ish. I still think some Saints fans, it should have come earlier, but it's great to get it in whenever it did, nice and early. So then it gives the management time to build. And Ian Culverhouse's interview, again, wasn't perfect. The announcement that he was staying, but it was positive at least. And with everything changing at the football club at the minute, like we talked about on the last podcast, it was really good to get that because we're going to need Ian Culverhouse and Paul Baz's experience, I think. And also Joe Simpson as well, who I think has really stepped up with a lot of the interviews he did last season. But I think those three together hopefully can start building a positive season next season when we get there.
The announcement of him staying, I've got to agree, totally disagree with you two. It didn't happen quickly. It took them over a fortnight, and the club didn't put out anything to say we are in discussions with Ian and looking at our options for next season. It was just total silence, which is totally unacceptable, but consistent with the PR of the club last season, but has got even worse during the summer. Now, I've received some messages about manager staying on, good, bad, whatever. I'm going to chuck some at you here. This guy, he's pleased, Andy is pleased that the manager is staying, but he feels manager had enough games to keep us up last season when he came in at the end of November. His points per game record, as we mentioned last time, of games he was in charge, was good enough over the course of a season, the 46-game season, to have got us out of trouble. So it's called in to get us out of trouble, get us out of relegation, and it could be said they failed. They didn't do what they were charged with doing. It could be said. Now, was it down to them to bring in the academy players from these football league clubs? Because if so, that failed. Didn't get us out of trouble. And on that point, there's more to come, but I'll chuck it over to you two. It's a point he makes here. Where would you go to get players to get us out of trouble? Bearing in mind, there's quite a few clubs in the Isthmian League, about half a dozen, who believe to go and have really good budgets next season, superior to what ours is likely to be. So where do we go to get players?
I think it's important to acknowledge that Ian accepted himself that he failed in the task at hand. You know, he's an intelligent man. He knew the remit when he comes in. And don't forget, you don't come into a club halfway through the season because the team's doing well. You know, the confidence of the players was absolutely rock bottom. And he had to build up that confidence and that mindset. And that doesn't happen overnight, especially the half of the season they had up until that point. I thought personally they had enough time to turn this around. But what I think you're looking at as well is the fact that were they allowed to get the players in that they wanted? You know, there's been, you know, banter here, say on the forums that the budget was spent and that's what he had to work with. And was it good enough? Some people thought it was good enough and that the money was there. But look, the fact is now, I think we've always said this, haven't we? With a new season, regardless of whether we went down or not, the new season was always going to be a reset and give Culverhouse and Bastock the same grace that you've given every other manager, Allinson for the 4 or 5 seasons before that, and Nobby up until that point as well. Give them the money, give them the support, and let them go about their work in their business. He was dealing with players that weren't his. We're not entirely sure how much say he had in the players that were coming in, or how. Because don't forget as well, Tabs, and you've hammered home this point every single week on the podcast. You're not going to entice good players in to a relegation threatened side halfway through the season. It's just not going to happen. So the hands were tied into that aspect, and I think that Jake's probably going to add a lot to this as well. But ultimately, you know, that is the hand that they were dealt. And yes, I am in agreement with Andy there. I thought we had enough, or Ian was the right person to keep us up. And I think the fact he didn't, was a real discussion point, a hot topic in the boardroom level about whether these two men are the right men to take us forward into the new season. But for me, they are. They've got the experience. And you talk about the players there, Jake. We've heard some names bandied about. We're not going to be able to go to the higher echelons and entice people down. We've got to look at people now who are just hungry. And if we can find a nugget of quality here and there, then that's going to be beneficial, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that point, I'd say if you look at those games last season, those games where we probably dropped points, crucial points, it wasn't necessarily the academy lads or the low knees from the high divisions that were costing us those games. Some senior players that were either in the team all season or that came in were signings, made some high-profile mistakes that cost us points in some of those games. And arguably, you know, the way we went down by such a fine margin, those points are what cost us. So I don't think it was just that. But I'd say, I mean, we heard last season about some players that the club were trying to sign, but their demands were a lot because of the situation we're in, as you'd expect. And also the management are trying to work within the club structure, aren't they? And Dave, I know you love the topic of our football director of football. Dare get you started, but there is that director of football there, and we don't know at the minute who's making the signings, and we don't know last season who was in full control of the signings. It might have been a harmonious relationship, might have been 50-50, whatever it is. We'll never know, will we, have that full picture of how it was in terms of last season at least.
The director of football, or head of football, whatever Harry Wheeler is called, I can't remember nowadays, does actually get mentioned later on. Going back, Lee, you say managers don't come in when clubs are doing well. You remember back in, I think it was 2000, wasn't it, when Bob Dowie got sacked, turn of the year. We were third in the table in the Isthmian League at the time. He got sacked. And Kevin Mudd took over what was, up until then, a very successful side. And he successfully took them down to 7th by the end of the season. That's by and by. Hello, Muddy.
But on that, what I would say in Muddy's defence, because he's so passionate about the club and he embraces everything good about the club. If you go to Kevin Mudd in a time of need, he's not going to say no, is he? And I think that speaking to him subsequently over the course of his sort of years about that tenure, he appreciated himself. He was underprepared for that role, but it was a situation he couldn't turn down. When your club comes calling in a moment of need, he felt he was big enough and strong enough and ugly enough to see it through. Ultimately, that was his downfall, because whilst he had the passion and the commitment, certainly, I think the know-how and the knowledge about that particular level of non-league football was a bit above him.
We're talking about knowledge of non-league football going on. The scouting team hadn't got a clue of a league we're in at that level. And you can go back to the signings last summer, and you can go back to, well, the next point is about scouts either had no knowledge of or didn't pay attention to the level below as well. Put those two together. And that is backed up by the humiliating FA Cup defeat at Galston. We got stuffed with 4 goals there. Beaten by Basford United at home in the FA Trophy. 2 results that should never have happened. And then the disaster in the league. So what the scouts are doing? Are they going to matches, or are they still watching videos? If they're still watching videos this season, then get them out now. Get people in who are going to go to games and watch games with their eyes, because they've shown that it doesn't work watching videos, which is what the perception of how they have been approaching games.
Which is, it highlights the importance, does it not, about giving Ian and Paul Bastock the most amount of time possible to build the squad that they want to build. I think when you've got Ian Culverhouse, who's, 300-400 Premier League appearances, top flight, international football, European football, and you've got Paul Bastock, who's the Guinness World Record holder for the most consecutive appearances. You'd like to think that they know what they're doing if they get the correct platform and procedure to go about their work. If they do have interruptions and they do have distractions along the way at levels in the boardroom, then it's going to make their job harder. And you'd have thought that, given how we ended last season, you'd think that there was enough capacity within the manager and the assistant and the coach Joe to let them do their own work. It is frustrating, but I think that there's enough now in the off season for Ian to build upon and to just go about his work. It's just a matter of, now we know what league we're in now. We've got, a really good player to build our team around. Hopefully they, as soon as it was announced, they knew what league they were going to be in. They're doing working behind the scenes, working hard to get the players in that want to play for this club. So they're going to be judged now, aren't they, on the players they build the team around, and how successful we are in those players performing on the pitch as well.
Well, as far as everybody knows, we haven't brought in a single player yet.
Well, yes, but we've heard, haven't we, that we understand that at least multiple signings have been made, just not announced for whatever reason. At the minute, we don't know why.
Totally incompetence.
And also, we've got Harrison Smith as well, along with Zane Banton. And I do just want to say, Zane Banton, it's lovely to have you back for next season, Zane.
Is there anything we're going to say tonight, Tabs, that you're actually going to agree with or embrace
or
acknowledge? Or
yeah, I agree with you, but the club is getting absolutely blasted by supporters for its lack of communication. It is getting absolutely destroyed by people inside and outside the club. They can say, what have you heard? What's going on? Not a thing. It is shameful what is happening at the moment. They're treating supporters with absolute contempt, but we come onto the social media nonsense in a while. Well, this is going well. Yeah. There was one interesting thing. The club, Tony Gautier is general manager now. He put out an unfortunate post several weeks back, which wasn't great, which is a shame. So I had a meeting with him week before that, and I enjoyed it, and it was positive. Oh, yeah, getting back to, you mentioned all the games Culverhouse played all around the world. But don't forget, of course, him and Bastock between them have made 318 appearances for St Albans. All right, 314 of them are Bazza, but, it doesn't matter. Right. We come back. Tony Gautier used this word reset. it's a soundbite. It means absolutely nothing. What is a reset? You look at that photo where Culverhouse was supposedly being interviewed in the boardroom, and you look at the people in it. It's basically the same people who made the mistakes last summer with the appointment of the manager and the players we got. What is a reset?
When it comes to statements the clubs put out, AI is a wonderful thing, isn't it? I think, look, I think it's a bit harsh going in so early on Tony. I've actually yet to meet him, and I actually really do want to have a really good chat. So I believe that we can have. I've got some good ideas about how I can help the club, and we can help the club, and supporters input, etc. However, you've had this meeting with him, and then a week later, you've gone in on him. Statement is a statement. I'm not entirely sure what. Look, it lacked empathy. It lacked any real passion. It was a nonsense statement. It didn't tell us anything. You joke about the lack of communication the club put out. I would rather hear of him said nothing up until that point, rather than put that out. It lacked a real structure and vision, and it lacked any emotion whatsoever. So hopefully we'll get a bit more of that as the players get announced, and maybe, as he said on his social media feed, you know, the new kits and the ticket pricing and all of the little nuggets of news that are going to be unleashed over the next sort of week or two. Hopefully there's going to be a bit more sort of soul in what the club puts out. But until that point, man, I mean, I'm not entirely sure what anyone gained out of that statement.
You have blasted that statement a lot more than I did, Lee. I just picked up on the reset word.
Yeah.
And where is the reset? You look at the people in that photo, and I'll come back to that point. It's the same people who made the mistakes last summer. What is the reset?
Oh, nice.
It's just a soundbite. Unfortunately, at the moment,
we're in a new league, which was planned for last summer. I don't think it's the league we expected to be in.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Oh,
that's the league. That's the league you wanted, wasn't it? We're going up, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh dear.
That went well, didn't it?
How old is that now? Going on for 19 years, right? Oh dear.
Anyway, moving on.
So reset means nothing. It's just a soundbite. Good. Right. Andy was busy, wasn't he? How confident are we that the chief scout and the director of football know enough about the Isthmian League for us to be confident of making a challenge to go straight back up? Bearing in mind, as we mentioned earlier, maybe half a dozen clubs. We're looking at the likes of Billericay Town, Chatham Town, Dartford, Folkestone, Invicta, Ramsgate, champions of the South East Division with 109 points last season. They're all expected to have decent budgets, probably greater than ours. How confident are we with that set up behind us? We're going to be able to challenge those clubs and go straight back up.
That's a genuine concern for me. You'd like to think any player would want to come and play in front of an average 1,800 fans at Clarence Park. You'd like to think they want to come and play for Ian Culverhouse and Paul Bastock, who, okay, despite the relegation, they've got promoted with multiple clubs in non-league. You'd like to think they know what they're doing. They can build a force. They can really get this club moving back in the right direction. You'd like to think players would want to come and play for this club. The only sticking point is going to be finances, and that isn't down to them. So I think when it comes to the productivity of the team overall, the owners have got to be in on this discussion as well. But also, we spoke at length over the course of the last 2 or 3 seasons about the real impact of a director of football. I think it has even less impact at this level in terms of the Isthmian. I think you need a scouting network. Of course you do, because I'm not entirely sure logistically, Ian in particular, maybe Baz, they're not going to get around to sort of see the games when they need another set of eyes and ears at these teams. So I think scouting network, absolutely. Director of football, it's going to be a bit condescending when you've got Harry Wheeler, who, as good a coach as I'm sure he is, director of football, he's most certainly not, telling Ian Culverhouse and Paul Bastock what sort of players they should be signing. But look, Harry has got the ears of the owners, and until that point comes when that no longer happens, then he's going to be there, and hopefully he can turn this around, because he is part of the reason why we are relegated, and now he needs to turn that around and be part of the reason why we are going in the right direction.
So we're not resetting the director of football. What about you, Jake? Any opinions on this?
I am confident in Culverhouse and Bazza, and I was very pleased they were appointed. But beyond that, I think there's definitely a lot of questions at the minute. And for me, I think for this new season, we just need Culverhouse and Bazza to have that total control and power, I think, because they need that at the club. They know what they're doing, they're experienced. We know it's going to be tough. So for me, the management team, great. Beyond that, question marks, of course, I think.
Another thing, the club I think stressing somewhere or other about going down the league actually helps us to bring through the players from the academy and under 23. So if we keep going down far enough, we will get a good enough side coming through. Then we look at the two county cup ties. They were totally outclassed, and particularly one where we had no first teamers in it, outclassed by a side below the level we're going into, but had half its first team out. There is nothing there coming through. To think they're going to come through and get us up this season and help boost that squad, it's pie in the sky. It's not going to happen. They're not good enough from what we saw, that evidence last year. They're at least a couple of years away from maturing into players good enough to help us. So what backup have we got within the club? We haven't. We've got to go outside to get the right players.
I mean, it was 2 games, Tavs. And I think, but I know what you're saying, because I was quite critical of the games that I saw with the under 23s that, wasn't particularly impressed. And then we had someone comment on the YouTube feed, that we were being quite harsh and very, very critical. It was just what we saw. I don't really know. I know a couple of the under 23 players, but as I said before, these aren't under 18s. These aren't under 21s. These are under 23s. And yes, there are some young lads in there as well. But you talk about reset. You're hoping that Ian and Bazza, there's an opportunity for everybody. It's a clean slate. I'm not entirely sure, given the fact, as you have alluded to already, we've only got about 3 players. I'm not entirely sure that they're in a position to discard anyone at this stage. I'm sure they'll all come together when pre-season starts, and they'll get given us just as much of an opportunity as anyone else coming
in. Yeah, fair point. But it's not going to happen at all. But looking at the league we've gone into, right, the Isthmian League, we're back there after a 20-year gap or whatever it is. So we were there from 1923 to 2004. And many of those years, it only had 1 division, so we couldn't go down. We were quite safe. Right, what do we think about it? We got new clubs to play: Burgess Hill Town, Chichester City, Craig Valley Paper Mills, Folkestone Invicta, #United, who play at Aveley's ground, and Ramsgate. We've played all the others in various ways. Is it a league we should be walking through, or is it really going to be that tough? We've got to get it right. We might have to spend more money than we want to get in there, to get up there, I mean.
It's a tough league. You've already said, Dave, about the clubs that are going to be big spending. But I think we've already seen that with some of the signings other clubs have announced. It is going to be hard. I think a lot of fans maybe think we'll go down, and it will be easy. It certainly won't. I think top 7 finish at this stage would be lovely to get a playoff place, or top 5, whatever it is in that division. Probably top 5. Oh, good God. It is. Yeah, it's going to be really hard. We saw last season the way that clubs spent money, and those clubs keep coming. There's a lot of clubs that are putting a lot of money into their first team squads now, and that it's going to be tough to compete. We've heard the budget's going to be decent this season, but will that be enough? I don't know. It's going to be really, really hard.
Well, you've heard it's going to be decent, Jake. Have you heard figures, or have you just heard it's going to be decent?
No. I can't comprehend figures that big. Sorry, Dave.
So you haven't heard a figure? No, I don't want you to say it. I don't want you to say it. You haven't heard a figure. So you've heard another sound bite.
No.
Okay. Okie dokie. Sticking with the Isthmian League, what about admission prices for next season? Is the club going to bring it down? The 18 quid last season, if you turn up on the gate. The highest I've seen so far, about 14 clubs in the Isthmian League announced their prices so far. The highest is 15 quid. The average is about 13.50, or just over 13 quid, actually. How low will we go? Or will we go down at all?
Well, there was always some correspondence. Jake, you'll be able to elaborate a little bit more, my friend, about the trust. They've gone to the club, haven't they? And they've suggested that it would be a really astute motion to reduce the admission for this coming season, whether the club do or not. But there's an argument, though, isn't there? Is that if you want the budget to be competitive and at the high echelon of the Isthmian, that money's got to come from somewhere. I probably am in the minority in so much that I don't mind paying the higher admission price if it means that gets reinvested back into the squad. But again, and I think the club needs to be really, really careful about how they approach this, because if they keep it the same, the number of home games isn't going to be as much, but also then you've got to start winning, haven't you? You know, we alluded to this on the back end of the last pod. People were getting bored about getting spanked in games and losing football matches. If I'm paying £18 or whatever it is, or £16.50 or 15 quid, I want to see that return invested back into the squad. And I think the gates will remain solid at the early part of the campaign. But if we don't get off to a fly, we don't start challenging at the right end of the table, then those crowds start to dwindle, because, you know, we're not playing your Torquays and your Ebbsfleets and your Hemel Hempsteads anymore. You know, we're playing your Cray Wanderers and your Ramsgates and whatever. So we need to start stepping up, and we need to see a return for our own personal investment as well.
It's only one club in the Isthmian League Premier Division that had higher attendances than us last season. So why would we charge 18 quid when the next highest is 15? Dulwich are that club with a higher attendance. They have an average of roughly 2,500 last season. They're only charging 13 quid. How we could justify above 15 is going to be very difficult. Even that, you're going to need to get off to a good start to keep supporters on side. Because don't forget, we're no longer Chicken George. We're Kentucky Fried Chicken, aren't we now? Going down where we're going. Jake, you got an opinion on this?
As Lee
Soundbite.
says.
That's a soundbite, Tabs, isn't it?
Soundbite.
It's a soundbite.
Soundbite is the phrase of the day, ironically. Yeah, there was a little update on the Trust social media feeds a couple of weeks ago. We'd gone.
So, hang on, who's on that? Is that you on that? Have you got all of the login details for that?
Yes, yes, several people, and the Trust has gone to the club and suggested, you know, ticket prices for each game of around £12 to £15 in line with the rest of the Isthmian division. Sorry, and I would hope it's something like that. But I will say, I thought the statement from Tony Gautier and the way that read, at least, it made me think that ticket prices maybe won't be changing very much going into the new season. And like Lee, I think a lot of fans will be happy to still pay as long as that football is good and it's entertaining and we're competitive. But as you say, Dave, in the summer of so far of not a lot of communication and fans, I think, being a bit confused as to what is generally going on, I think trying to justify that situation and those prices, I think, will be very, very difficult. And we've seen, I think, in the last year or so, that a lot of fans now on social media, the backlash against the club, when it has come, has certainly been stronger. I thought we saw it last summer when David Noble got reappointed. Sorry, didn't get promoted. We did with Bedford Town, but we don't mention that. That when he got reappointed, a lot of fans on social media were quite negative about his reappointment. And I think if a ticket decision comes and it is not as to what most fans were expecting, I think there'll be a bit of a backlash on social media.
Yeah, you mentioned something there, Jake. Tony's statement about the prices or the budget or whatever is going to keep us competitive. That's what we're looking at. Well, what is keeping us competitive? Being in the relegation zone for 45 out of 46 league games, losing at home to lower league opposition in the FA Trophy, getting absolutely spanked by lower league opposition in the FA Cup, going down to a record home defeat in the Hearts Charity Cup, losing again to lower league opposition in the Hearts Senior Cup. So I hope that's not the level of keeping us competitive they're looking at. I hope they're actually looking to win things and win a few games and beat lower league sides, and preferably even a few at our own level.
Are you looking forward to this upcoming season, Tabs, or
Not in the slightest, no.
No, I didn't get that impression, mate.
It seems like Dave's had a lovely few weeks, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? He's just sitting in there, just like it's like rumping. It's under the trolls.
But I just find it patronising to say keep the club competitive when it certainly was not competitive at all last season. And this is what annoyed me about the club not coming out saying, We apologise. We got it wrong. Last summer we got it wrong. We're making changes. No, we're having a reset. We're not making changes at all. And it's no admission. You got the. We'll come on to this nonsense about a new ground in a minute. The chairman's given a great long statement about that. He's not said a single word about us being relegated. He went very quiet when it was all going wrong, when his choice as manager was getting it wrong. And we've heard nothing about him since. And as chairman, that is not acceptable. He should have been up there saying, we got it wrong, blah, blah, blah. Just pacify supporters. And this is what we're going to do to put it right. Instead, total silence.
I'm not entirely sure Tony's going to be having a lot more meetings, mate, with you if you keep going down this train of thought, mate.
Lee, I'm just telling you, also, it's my opinion, yes, but also the messages I've had. I got one yesterday from somebody said, I'm different about a season ticket this year. I'm hearing nothing about players. He said, I haven't got anything on a single new player coming to the club so far. We've got Harrison Smith on contract, Zane Banton starting. Got nothing about David Longe-King. Last I heard, he was having a chat with another club. Nothing on James Sweet, is the other one we haven't heard, and Jack James. The three players we haven't heard of.
Alex Wald. Alex Wald.
Alex Wald as well. It is totally unacceptable, this silence, and supporters, they're getting on to me. So you two, as well as everyone who's watching this, is going to have to hear it as well, because a lot of supporters will be thinking the same. What the hell is going on?
Okay, so there's a lot to dissect there. Right, we were, as you know, we were also there at Gorleston, and we were with you, shoulder by shoulder, travelling up and down the land, supporting the club. We know that there's very impassioned, empowered opinions about how last season went. Yes, the statements that have been put out by the club so far, since our relegation, has been nothing less than absolute farcical bollocks. Right, and I think that is there. Considering that I've written a few of these for other professional clubs over the last few months, what the club have put out, needn't have bothered. But there's time. There's time from that. And look, the reset is going to be in the proof of the pudding, right? It's going to be in the players we sign. I think Tony alluded to it in one of his tweets today. This upcoming week, there's going to be, influx of players coming into the side. Brilliant. Ticket prices are going to be announced. So all the questions that hang over our head will ultimately be answered in the next week or two. We can keep harping on about what the club have done since the relegation. Let's judge them now. If they want a reset, fine. We'll judge you according to that reset. Let's now hold to account the club about the actions going forward now, as opposed to what have happened in the past. Because we can beat ourselves up about it, but it doesn't make it any easier a pill to swallow. Let's look forward. Let's see where we are coming. This week should give us a real clear indication about how serious they are about getting back up into the National League South.
Right. No, not in agreement with a lot of that, Lee. I'll tell you for why. This podcast, we review games that have taken place and we talk about them. We do a scant little bit about what's coming up in the future.
Yeah.
So here, what we're doing today, we are looking at what the club has done so far this summer. And it's pitiful. We can't say, yeah, they're going to get it right. They're going to make these statements. The reset's going to be right and everything. We can only go with what is presented in front of us at the moment. We can also, yes, it's going to be wonderful in the future. Club kept telling us it's going to be wonderful under David. No, but I don't think it was in the end. So do we just go along saying, yeah, it's all going to come out right in the end? What
are you reviewing? What are you reviewing? You're reviewing something that happened a month ago. All of the news. We've got players leaving. We've had our record National League goal scorer left. We've had our captain leave. And you're worried about a statement which was pitiful at best. We should be focusing on celebrating the players and the introduction of and what they brought to our side. We should be looking at that as opposed to you getting upset about a statement which happened a month ago.
Well, that statement, we've moved on. I've been through a whole load of other stuff other people have sent in since then. The statement, I only picked up on one word, don't forget. You were hard on it, Lee, and I was, as I recall. No, we're just going for lack of news. The club, all right, we're going to the social media. We had that thing about clubs got problems with its social media. Now, I don't know much about social media. You two know a lot more than I do. But what I've been told, it's not possible for all your social medias to fail in the way the club has said it. It simply isn't possible unless somebody has totally screwed up all the passwords for every single one, in which case it doesn't take a fortnight to put them right. The club still has access to its website. So why isn't it putting the news on there about all these signings you say we're making?
And
why are they keeping quiet about them?
And also, there's no mention on the website about any of the departures as well, is there? About any of the players that Lee just mentioned. So I agree with that, definitely. The whatever's going on with social media, and it's very unclear, isn't it? It's all very mysterious. And by all accounts, it is going to be changing this week. We don't know why this week specifically or what's going to happen. But it's great to get that news going forward. But yeah, the strategy this summer so far has been really, really poor. And Tony, he's had a little bit of stick this episode. I think he's been very clear on his Twitter feed as to what he's trying to achieve, but it's just not being replicated anywhere else, is it, at the minute? So there is a lot of fans that are sat in the dark, unfortunately. And it's nearly the end of May, and I know there's going to be news this week, but it's not long until pre-season starts, and we don't know about much of what's going on. So yeah, it's quite enjoyable being in the dark.
Is it? Okay, if you say so. Right, you two have got some news, I believe. Meeting you attended last week.
Before we do, I think we should mention those players that have gone, actually, some of them, before we do, actually, because the stadium might take, who knows how long that would take.
Okay.
There's been a few departures.
Right, those have gone since the end of the season. Some of them are already out on loan. We'll do a hit and miss on them, if you like.
Yeah.
We're very successful or not. Iffy Allen, 9 games, no goals. Hit or miss?
Massive miss.
Go along with that, Lee?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah.
Well, I won't do with loan players because they're not our players. Right, one who played a lot of games, didn't finish many of them. Josh Castiglione, 42 games, 2 goals. Hit or miss?
He was a fan favourite, but I think it's a miss for me. Yeah, I don't think there was enough productivity from him consistently over the course of the season. So miss for me.
Okay, I'll go along with you. Everything you said there, Lee, 100%. Jake, instead of waving your head left and right or up and down.
I can't make my mind up. Probably a miss. He was liked by fans, and I think fans appreciated his effort. But he promised a lot, didn't we? And when we signed him, he was one of those signings. I think a lot of fans thought, "Cool, we can have a good season here." It just didn't live up to it.
Ken Charles, 37 games, signed from Banbury United, 11 goals. To me, not a total miss, but I would have liked to have got more out of him. Something was just lacking in his game, but I don't know, another season at a lower level, I think he might have done it for us.
Yeah, I think he's sort of in between, isn't he? It'd be interesting to see where he ends up, actually. I think he's got big aspirations as to what next for him. So, yeah, but he didn't. I mean, he went. I know he got injured, but I mean, he didn't score between November and April, did he? For a striker, that's just not good enough.
Lee?
Yeah, difficult one, this, isn't it? I think Jake alluded to it there. I think he was very pleased with himself for quite a lot of the time, considering that the productivity wasn't always there on the pitch as well. I quite liked him when he came on, and towards the latter end of the season, I thought he showed a bit more promise. But you're going to be judged as a striker on your goals, and he didn't score anywhere near enough of those. Fans' favourite, hit, productivity, and end result, miss.
Right, we didn't see much of this guy because he departed early in the season on loan off to Basingstoke Town, but I think we know which way this one's going to go. Sam Deadfield. Didn't do it for me with a few games we saw of him.
No, big miss.
Yeah. But again, I think he was one of the ones who was a victim of Nobby's football, which was just to keep possession rather than put pressure on the opposition, creating chances. So maybe he didn't get a chance to see the best of him. Right, the next one, taking them alphabetically, a bloke called Sean Jeffers. Now, there's 2 things to look at with Sean here, obviously. Last season and his career as a whole. We'll go for his career as a whole, 100% success, I would think. And for last season, unfortunately, we've said it many times, I don't think we created enough chances for him when he was playing because of the way we played as a team. But he did miss some, particularly in the latter part of the season. In olden days, you would expect him to stick away. So it was far from one of his better seasons last year.
Yeah, last season was an absolute miss, but I think that it was a result of the circumstance. wasn't it? And as you say, there were so many different facets to his game which just didn't come off at all. But I think you need to look at what is arguably one of the best post-war strikers we've had. St Albans City gave him his career, and sort of he returned in kind. I think we got the best years out of him. I think the goals and the memories he's helped create have certainly, left. He is a legacy player without a shadow of a doubt. One of the best strikers to grace this club. And although we knew this day was coming, I think it was no less sad when it was finally announced he was to leave the club. And I think if his appetite is still there, Tabs, I think no one would begrudge him going to the well for one last league campaign somewhere at this level, perhaps, or whoever can afford him. I think the support for him will always be there. The love for Sean Jeffers will always be there. I managed to speak to him very, very briefly in this off season. He's loved our passion for the club. He's loved the fact that support he's had from all of the fans, and he's absolutely said that in his comments as well. But I think, yes, last season, massive miss. But I think given his body of work, I was looking up to him on some of the key games, the Weymouth game at home, for example, where I wanted him to really sort of shine. It just didn't happen. And it's sad. There's an irony, isn't he, that he was the one that scored our last goal in the National League South. But again, it's just, he was one of our, if not the highest earner. And you'd imagine at this level now, that money distributed between 2, maybe 3 really good players is going to be more beneficial than have that question mark hanging over his head for another campaign.
Jake?
Yeah, totally agree with everything Lee said. He's a great player for us, wasn't he? Last season was a miss, but everything before that was an absolute hit. And we put out on our social media feed when Ian Anderson signed him, and he said he'll be one of the best players we ever signed for this football club. And he was right. He was. And the things he achieved for us, the places he got to us, and just a shame, really, he never really got a promotion, that Oxford City final. And when you reflect on it, it's such a shame he started that game on the bench. And that's the thing about Sean Jeffers. It wasn't all just harmonious and beautiful, was it, for him during his time at the club up until last season? He had to deal with managers that didn't want to play him, managers that dropped him to the bench, that managers that wanted to try and get rid of him and sell him. And he still battled on. He battled on for the club, for the fans. And at times it would have been easy for him to down tools, wouldn't it? But he didn't. He kept going. And even last season, season before last, 27 odd goals. Some fans saying we held on to him too long, but he has been a brilliant player. And I suspect that next season, wherever he ends up, especially if it's sort of at step 3, he'll probably still score goals. So it's a real shame to see him leave like this. But I think, we just want to say thank you, don't we, for the effort, even if last season was a forgettable one.
You mentioned about him being one of the all-time great strikers, Lee. Last season, 10 goals in 49 games. Not a great return, but overall, he still ended up with 117 in 219 games, which in the modern era is a tremendous achievement. And it's a shame, but last season it dented that record a bit.
Yeah. It did, but also I think it's the quality of the goals as well, Tabs. They weren't just all tap-ins. Some of them were absolute belters. You think of Dartford away, you think of Worthing away. He was, in my opinion, in his heyday when he was playing for us, one of the hottest strikers in non-league football. He was the most feared strikers in non-league football. And the service, as Jake said, even when it wasn't going his way, not through his own fault, he had the integrity of, excuse the pun, a saint, because he was treated horrifically by some of the managers. I think he can hold his head high. You can paint over all of the murals around the town centre and all around Clarence Park if you want, but ultimately it's the memories and the goals that fans are going to remember the most.
It's funny, last season was bad, but he did have bad spells along the way, particularly dying embers of Ian Anderson's reign. He was having a terrible time then. Then Nobby came in, supposedly didn't like him as a player, and he scored, 12 in 10 games under the start of Nobby's reign. It's bizarre. Anyway, yes, thank you, Sean. We'd all appreciate what you did. Now, we've lost a goalkeeper or two. Michael Johnson's gone to Hemel Hempstead Town. Apparently, they've still got a club. Last season, 51 games, it wasn't his best season, but I still think he was a hit last season. And 172 games for the club in total. And for me, he's one of many fine goalkeepers we've had down the years.
Yes, I think unfortunately, he is a fine keeper for us, and he's a fantastic servant. He always wore his heart on his sleeve. Certainly, I don't think he's in the top 4 or 5 goalkeepers we've had, but his distribution was poor, and I think at times he'll be remembered for the saves he didn't make, as opposed to the ones that he did. His shot stopping was second to none. His penalty save ratio is legendary. We like MJ. Yeah, and you can see at Truro away on the last day of the season, Jake will explain more, that he was quite physically sort of emotional about what had just happened. He gave it everything, I think, but I think the Enfield game, but towards the latter of the last season, I just wonder whether, had he not made that mistake, look, it's not just down to one man, but I think that sticks in the head, especially at a crucial time of the season as well. Maybe it was just time to move. Maybe that Culverhouse and Bazza looked at that. I think, well, you know what, we need a safer pair of hands here. But again, he's a huge hit, of course. But still, I'm not entirely sure he can convince everybody.
In his 172 games, I think it's 52 clean sheets, which is a pretty decent turnaround, particularly as one of those, as we say, for the relegation season. How's he rate for you, Jake?
Yeah, I think his overall spell, I think definitely hit, and he became a real fan's favourite, didn't he? And he put in some brilliant displays, brilliant moments. Think of the FA Cup run. We wouldn't have got there without that penalty save down at Concord Rangers in that warm September afternoon. So, yeah, brilliant memories there again. But similar to Shaw Jeffers in a way, actually, I thought last season was a bit more of a miss. I thought he still had really great displays, but I thought he made a couple of mistakes too many, like Enfield and some other games that just didn't quite get us there in the end, unfortunately. But he obviously cared a lot. He loved the club. We won't mention the whole signing for the club down the road bit, because that sort of doesn't quite agree with that. But that's football. But overall, he's still been a great servant. I think Saints fans will come away from his spell at the club with great memories, because it's not often again that you get a goalkeeper that stays at the club for 5 years in total and get that many appearances.
Well, he's not the highest goalkeeper appearances. What we got? Micah Smith back in the 1920s, I think, probably beat it. Percy certainly beat it. Mark Pearson. Gareth Howes was well up there as well. He's another great goalkeeper. We've had a few that have stayed a long time, but I know the point you're making, Jake. Yeah. Now, Brandon Mason, he played 20 games for us. He was excellent on his debut for us. Where was it? Down at Salisbury, wasn't it? After that, I thought he went downhill rapidly and was a big miss. I thought he cost us badly. But I see he joined Farnham Town. Now, if I remember rightly, back in the 90s, I think we had a friendly down at Farnham. Well, it was great. Was it Cockers taking it? Somebody was taking the corner. And the pitch was so close to the banking, you had to walk up part of the banking to walk down and then take the corner. It was brilliant. Anyway, that's by the by. You're on my screen there, Jake, for some reason. Your opinion of Brandon Mason?
I thought first few games, massive hit. I thought Salisbury, Welling away, he was brilliant. And then something just happened, didn't it? And he just went off a cliff performance-wise, unfortunately. And like you say, it really cost us at times. Think of what the Weymouth home game. That, I hinted it earlier, experienced players. He's one of them, didn't we? I think we thought he was going to be a great experienced signing. And it just didn't work out in the end. And I don't think it was any surprise when the announcement came that he wouldn't be staying. He contributed a bit, but I just don't think he ever reached the level in the sort of after that first 4 or 5 games that really was required in that relegation battle.
Lee?
Yeah, I think that if there was genuine competition for him for his place, I don't think he plays as many games towards the end of last season. I liked him. He had good energy, but I think he was just chasing shadows at times as the games went on. I thought he tired quite easily, and for a defender, especially a fullback, it was a concern. I'm not entirely sure. I think it was a miss in so much that he's going to be remembered for the things he didn't do. as opposed to the efforts in which he did. So, although obviously we thank him for his efforts, and he was okay in spells, but I think as a defender, you get caught on the ball too much. You get caught the wrong side of the defender, and I think Ian was pointing towards him in more than a few of his post-match interviews as well when we conceded goals. I think the writing was on the wall about his departure.
Safari Moore, last season, we were quite pleased when he came back to the club last summer, early weeks of the season. Didn't live up to what we saw first time round. Definite hit then when he was on one side, Devante Stanley was on the other side, and gave good balance to the side. But last season, definite miss. Overall, he'd be remembered favourably, I think.
Yeah, definitely. That first season was brilliant, wasn't it? I think Hampton away with that hat-trick. And he was a really good player in that side. I think got injuries in the National League, didn't he, with Oxford? And he just doesn't seem to have been able to find that form again. And I will say, actually, I think quite a lot of fans that I spoke to did think in the running of last season, did he need to come back into the side, give someone like Mason a bit of competition, even if it's for one or game or two? I know he featured in the cup games, which obviously didn't go well, but that was cup games. I mean the County Cup and Charity Shield, the Charity Cup. Obviously, inexperienced sides around him. Whereas, could he have been maybe chucked in for one or two of those games in the running to see if he had something there potentially that he could have added? But unfortunately, not.
No. Well, Lewis Mitchell, but he left in January to join Slough Town, so we can skip over him. Now, one, I think you're going to go on, because you mentioned him a few times during the season, Lee, how high hopes we had for him. Alfie Payne, was it National League Player of himself, wasn't it, the season before, something like that, with Braintree Town. Whether, again, he was a victim of it was negative football we played under Nobby, just keeping the ball, not trying to win games. I'm not sure, not totally convinced. And where was he at the end of the season? Quite shamefully, the club wasn't mentioning why he wasn't going to games or being in the squad. We don't know what happened to him. He might have fallen off that cliff Jake mentioned earlier. I don't think so. 29 games. I can't believe anyone's going to say anything other than a miss, unfortunately.
It's weird, isn't it? Despite the fact, the dilemma that we found ourselves in and how desperate our situation was, he wasn't even getting selected then. You know, he was running around the perimeter of the pitch, or he just wasn't doing anything. He wasn't even on the bench half of the time. That points to maybe an attitude thing. Because someone of his caliber and his quality, a good manager would just cast any sort of doubts about his attitude aside for the sake of the team to put a good player out onto the pitch. In fact, that isn't even happening. But again, I think Alfie Payne is a good player, but I think he also thrives with good players around him. And sometimes you get the impression that some players are up for the fight when things aren't going particularly all of your way. But again, massive miss. But you can't begrudge the intent in which the club all the lengths the club went to get him in. On paper, he and Deadfield, all the fans were very excited about that pairing. But again, they just didn't come to fruition. And that's what happens sometimes. And it's not all about getting the best players who are on lots and lots of money. You want good players who want to play for you, play for the manager. And hopefully now that Culverhouse and Baz have got that platform this off-season, that's the type of player they can get in. Players who want to play regardless of whether their stature is good in the league above or not.
Yeah, I will give Alfie a little bit of leeway in saying he may, like Deadfield, may have been a victim of the tactics we were playing at the time.
Yeah.
And you Jake? Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think, I'm quite shocked he made 29 appearances, actually. But like you said, Dave, I'm amazed it was that many. But for me, Alfie didn't start the season well, did he? And I think he's a confident player. I think if he's got a management and a team that really support him and get behind him. And I do think now, upon reflection, when Matt Lynch came in and Alfie Payne just got absolutely booted out of the side at the time for a player who was good. Matt Lynch was good, but, obviously wasn't training much and wasn't really able to do too much on Tuesday and Thursday, but it was still coming into the starting 11. I think that was probably a killer for the confidence that Alfie never really recovered from. And to be honest, again, I wouldn't be shocked if he finds a new club and does very well, wherever that be, because that time at Braintree, it wasn't a mistake. That was a very good Braintree side. They got promotion deservedly that season. So best of luck to him. It's just a shame, really, it didn't work out, and I think it's actually kind of a metaphor for the season, wasn't it? Get your hopes up for this great signing at the start of the season, and by the end of the campaign, they're nowhere to be that injury or whatever's going on. It just didn't end like we hoped it would be.
That comment about Braintree deservedly winning promotion, Jake, that's got nothing to do with you getting a free drink in the boardroom, has it?
Hey, we won't mention about that. Hey, that wasn't even me. That was a Mr. Wood. He's the one with the connections at Braintree.
Right, one player to go who proved to be quite decisive on people's opinions. For me, he was a 2-season miss. He really was. Gio Rasulu, first season, 50 games, 10 goals. Last season, 48 games, 1 goal. And for me, he had at best a handful of good games. He just didn't deliver. People say how good he is. Well, we didn't see it. Not in my book.
Yeah. Hey, Lee, thank you. No, I think that's fair. I think we knew he was good, didn't we? He was technically really, really good. He had the ability to control a game. He just didn't do it quite enough. I thought this season, sort of March onwards, up till that red card against Chesham, he was actually having a really good time then, wasn't he? And he was playing well. And I remember that red card, we talked about how much of a big loss he would be. And he came back, and again, he just couldn't quite impact games like he could. I think the memory for me, Lee, you'll probably agree, is Torquay away 2 seasons ago, that 4-0 victory. And that day, Gio he was running it, wasn't it? He was enjoying it. Of course, it helped. He had so much space in midfield, and Torquay were in absolute shambles that day. But, he was taking the mick, wasn't he, at times with the way he's playing that day. But we just saw it so little generally in his performances throughout his time at the club that just probably is a miss, I think.
Well, it's a miss because your overriding factor of that play is a game that happened a year ago. I think that tells everything you need to sort of... Yes, we knew roughly how good he was, but also he knew how good he was. And I think he had a very sort of high opinion. And look, it was undoubted skill. But the fact of the matter is, we saw it very few and far between, and not in enough games where we needed him to step up. I think that was the thing. The flicks, the twists, and the turns were coming out when, God forbid, we were actually winning a game. But I think his quality on the ball was good, no doubt. But I don't think a relegation battle is the sort of situation in the one where he thrives. So I think give him a promotion season, give him a team that's happy to keep the ball. I think that's where his his forte is. I'm with you, Taz. Unfortunately, it is a 2-season miss from me. Good player, no doubt about that, but we just didn't see enough of it in the key areas when we needed him the most.
That Torquay game, he scored twice in that game, of course, and Shaw Jeff has got 2 as well. We don't know the position of Jack Jones. We assume he's still with the club. If that's the case, when of the 16 players we named in the squad that day, only 2 are still with the club. Zane Banton being the other one. How times have changed, but you could probably do that for most of last season's games when we go on to next season. Right, so we've annihilated last season's squad, most of whom have been got shot off. We don't know the players for definite who are coming in. You got anything else to add, or can we go and put dinner on now?
I think there'll be player news this week, but also we better mention the stadium stuff, haven't we, Dave? That you almost tried getting us to about 20 minutes ago.
Doesn't want to have to talk about that, does he?
Oh no!
Go on then, you two at a meeting at a club, try to keep quiet, which sums up the whole nonsense about it.
Go on, Jake.
Oh no! So we nearly, because we had nothing better to do with our Thursday night, attended the Chiswell Green Residents Association meeting.
Rock
AGM.
and roll. That's how rock and roll we are.
Last Thursday with a couple other fans, Aaron and Kian. So clearly, all 4 of us have very busy lives. And actually, yes, and also it's fair to say quite a lot of St Albans City Football Club as a whole. There was quite a lot of people there, weren't there, Lee?
Well, there's not a lot left. Mate, there's not a lot of them left. So they all...
Well, half the first team squad were there. Good to see you,
Zane?
Yeah, hello, Zane.
How are we doing, Zane?
Yeah, So it was an interesting evening. The first half was sort of talking about all the developments that the local residents are opposing, the crimes that have been committed in the local area, and the cheese and wine available. After half time, Lawrence stepped up and started talking about the community impacts of the club and everything that the club is achieving. Great, great, great. And then it got on to the main point of the development of a new stadium. Lawrence didn't mention this initially, but it is on the same site that was located back in 2018, which is the Noak Lane site, as it's known as probably to most fans. If you don't know St Albans, Google it. And the main bits are that it's not going to be a housing development, is it, Lee? It's going to be funded by what they're either a business park or a data center, basically, which should be an enabling development, which is going to be, there's going to be in the local plan, there's going to be set out that there will be a support for a sustainable development of a new stadium for the football club, but the enabling development has to work within these certain restrictions. Do you want to take over, Lee?
Not really. Yeah, I think my takeaway from, Lawrence and John were obviously quite shocked to see us there. I mean, this wasn't like a hijacking by anything. It was an open meeting to all of the public, and we are, as fans, genuinely interested about the new ground. I think my takeaways from this, so many people would have seen the previously submitted embargoed statement that the club sent to the St Albans Times for release on the Friday morning. I think what the club should have done is been a bit more prepared going into the meeting, because it was quite evident, Jake, that the majority of people had no clue where they were talking about building this new ground. Lawrence just assumed that everyone thought it was going to be, or everyone knew about the previous application down on Noak Lane. The club, considering they had the developers there, who aren't housing developers, they're new developers and they're into commercial property. So there's going to be no housing attached to this, as Jake said. I thought the club were embarrassingly underprepared, really. They should have done their homework a bit better. I thought what would have sort of made their lives a bit easier was to have the footprint of the site with the proposed different areas of where they could build a new ground. I think that would have saved so much time going into these conversations. It's a very early meeting, and I think that although Lawrence didn't read from a script, I think he was very humble, and I think that is very much in keeping with the last fans forum we had when he admitted that there were mistakes made. One issue I have, especially with the statement, I think at the meeting there, what I would say as well is that the club portray they've got this global media footprint, but yet very little people in that meeting knew who the club were, knew the history of the club, knew about the club, didn't know what league they were playing in. I think the club have got to do a bit more work behind the scenes to get the residents up to speed in just how important the club are, and the benefit that they can do within the local community. Community was your word of the day, Tavs, a soundbite. That was very much the word of the day in that meeting. One thing I would say, there was a part of the statement, and it was something along the lines of, as lifelong supporters ourselves, we know how important it is that the club, that the fans' voices, all that sort of lifelong supporters. Now, listen, the club are going to be scrutinised enough about this without coming out with that sort of fabrication, because of course the owners that are fans, of course they're invested so much, physically, emotionally, financially, of course. But don't come out with stuff like that which isn't true, because all you're going to do is build yourself up to be something that you're not. And what you want to be honest, you want to be totally transparent about all of this. There was a timeline, Jake, wasn't there? You can tell about the timeline, mate.
Yeah, so they're looking, so between now and mid-2026, they're doing what they're calling a community consultation, weren't they? For the next year or so.
Stay with us, Tabs. Stay with us, mate.
Yeah, I don't think Dave's making it to the end. With the local community, and they also said fans. So that's going on, and then they're looking for a mid-2026 application of a planning submission. Of course, Lee, we think that's probably quite ambitious, potentially. And then by 2028, construction will begin, and they estimated it would take about 2 years to begin that, and well, not to begin, to get it completed. It's worth mentioning that you weren't speaking. Lawrence made it very clear that there is no stadium design as it stands. The architect was only appointed 2 months ago, so we're not very far down the road. And of course, Lee, back in 2018, the sort of stadium was fully designed, wasn't it, and ready to go. So it feels like we're a bit further back than when we were a long time, well, going on for 7-8 years ago. Those are quite big bits of news. They're looking at about a 100-acre site, but again, they don't know how much that site they're actually going to need to enable development until they know the cost of the stadium, which again, they don't know because they don't have architects and plans in place. Dave, we're almost done. It's all right. It's all right. General ideas are it's going to be 6,000 capacity with a mix of seating and terracing, along with 3G pitches around to support, of course, the first team and training and local community, etc., etc. But there's a lot to look at still, unfortunately. There's a lot of work to do. Of course, the local residents had a lot of questions, didn't they, Lee, as you'd expect? And also a couple of things, I think the key things there are there was a question from one resident that asked something along the lines of, if this enabling development, say it's a business park, and all the units don't get sold or all the offices don't get sold, etc., and you don't meet that financial requirement to enable the football ground, is the football club and the football ground going to be in debt to you? And the developer sort of said, well, we will be the landlord of the site, didn't they? That's pretty much it, Lee, right?
Yeah, so basically, so the developers, they own the land. They own the land. And if what Jake is saying, if that does come to fruition, then we won't own, the club won't own either the land or the stadium. I think one key point that you made to us when we went for our debrief beer afterwards is that in the initial proposal back 3-4 years ago, it had all the housing development. Now, if you're going to move the football club out of the town centre and include the housing development there, you've got a natural supporter base to sort of to tap it into. There's been no new housing affiliated with this new development. So therefore, you are banking on so many thousands of people. I mean, the capacity, he was looking at around 6,000.
Yeah.
Let's just assume that the attendances stay roughly where they are. Let's say 2,000. You are banking on 2,000 people making their way to an out-of-town stadium. And this is the concern that quite a lot of the residents raised. The timeline that Jake set out a bit earlier, that's 5 years away at best, if nothing. So that's no opposition. That's, there's no revising of plans, which does tend to happen with something of this size as well. I mean, that's 5 years away at best. I mean, really, you're looking at 6, possibly 7, because what you don't understand is where they want it built, it affects 2 different councils. It affects St Albans District Council, but also Hertsmere Council, because it's going to affect the people from Garston as well. So it's traffic, the nature of traffic, the number of cars, the transport situation and infrastructure, that was raised point after point, Jake, on Thursday. And it's a very, very clear indication that even at this early stage, the club went in there with the full intent of having a charm offensive and really and Lawrence did a great job in outlining what a thriving football club can do to the community. You're looking at all the different teams affiliated with the football club: city youth, disability team, girls teams, walking football. All of that elements will be, entrusted towards this one site. But ultimately, you're looking at it, and there was enough opposition, and I think the club had gone in there better prepared. They could have just maybe quashed a few of those concerns straight off the bud.
Yeah,
definitely. Right, I'm going to come in here. Sorry, Jake.
No, that's right.
A few things. Better ground development you mentioned in 2019. It was going to cost something like 20.
Dave's disappeared. He's been muted by the club. Go on, Dave, start again.
2019 development is going to cost £27 million. The club wasn't going to pay any of it. That was their intention. It's going to be totally the investors, which was never going to happen. Total pie in the sky. It's interesting you're saying about the club went into that meeting last week underprepared. It was absolutely shameful. Supporters weren't told about it. If you want supporters on side, what we do, we keep them in the dark. Underprepared. You go back to the Coney Heath ground development, which supposedly happened in 2011, 2012. The club hadn't done its due diligence there to realise it was on an old rubbish tip, and it cost something like $5 million to clear that out. And so that was never going to be a starter and total non-starter there. I don't know what size I need for this one. I don't know anything about it. It is just total nonsense. As various people have said to me this week, it's
He's been finally we found the way to mute Dave.
It's just a smokescreen by the club to hide its failings from last season on the pitch and off the pitch. And that, like the chairman I said, he hasn't mentioned relegation at all, but he comes up with this. He goes to a paper, Matt Adams' newspaper, just online, I believe. Nothing given to the Hearts ad, or is a review if that's still going. Nothing on the club website. This is absolutely shameful. Lack of communications is continuing in every aspect to do with the club. Supporters have just been taken for a ride.
Yeah, so Matt Adams has actually reached out to me and asked me to have some response to the statement. So hold tight for that. Yeah, your arguments aren't without merit, Tabs. I think that Lawrence and John have learned certain things from their mistakes of the past. But again, it's just, I mean, Jay, they came with advisors and they came with contractors and they had men. There was about 8 people who came with Lawrence and John. And yet, I don't know whether they were just there for moral support or whether they were there to sort of, I don't know, if certain questions came up, they can help sort of chip in. The whole thing just didn't sit particularly right. And bearing in mind that we're there as fans, we're there, we want the best for the club. Jake and I were the least of their concerns in terms of the owners. There was enough opposition in that room to suggest that the timeline that Lawrence had sort of sketched out in terms of the completion, or at least the start date, optimistic, I think, is the word we're looking for there.
Yeah, I think kudos to Lawrence for stepping up and going to that meeting, and it sounds like the club had been invited along or whatever the situation was. So I will give Lawrence kudos there for doing that, for stepping
absolutely.
up. But there wasn't enough information for the residents, let alone us as fans. You know, we were sort of sat in the corner, weren't we? Really, sort of just observing almost. And it was more just between Lawrence and the residents. Lots of comments as you'd expect, and a lot of answers he just couldn't answer because the club aren't in that position yet. So obviously, once they have those answers, then they'll be able to start sharing that information. But they've maybe got an idea already of the situation and the opposition that they're going to be facing with regards to this potential development at the minute. But I also agree with Dave. I think the better information's got to start coming out to fans as soon as possible. We had the fans forum a couple of years ago, like you said, in 2022 or whatever it was, Lee. And there was talk about the stadium then. I think, again, with everything that's gone on, you know, there is a need for a fans forum, isn't there? The trust has called for one. We need open communication with the ownership. But also, again, there just need to be updates on the website. There needs to be information provided. And the article in the Times is great. But again, not every Saints fan is going to see that, are they? Not every Saints fan has access to that. You've got to get this information as far and wide as possible for fans to be able to have their opinion and start knowing as to what is going on.
What you've said, the club has no idea what they need for this ground. No, I disappeared again. The club got no idea what they need for this ground, what space or anything. And you go back to 2012 when one of the owners stood up in front of a council meeting and said, if we don't get agreement in 18 months for a new ground, we're out of here. Well, that was 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah,
we haven't advanced one brick in that time.
No, what I would say is that when I raised a question at the last fans forum that why do they think that we are so further down the line now than they have ever been? Simply because of the terminology in the local plan. And the terminology, whilst is more favourable for the club, certainly doesn't guarantee anything in any shape or any form. In fact, they've got a whole new developer. They've only just appointed the architects. Some would argue that they're probably further away than they've ever been, simply because of the timeline that they've got to set out, but also how far they've come so far. I mean, they've just appointed the developers, they've just appointed the architects, they've just started the charm offensive with the local residents. And I think, I'm not speaking out of turn, Jake, it didn't go well for the club. You know, there was a lot more people left with questions than answers. So it's going to be busy time ahead for the owners and whatever collective working group is in charge of the new ground must try harder. We joked, Tabs, about hit or miss. In terms of that meeting, that was a miss. They were underprepared and they should have done better. They should have learned from their mistakes, and I don't think they did that.
And this is a community in St Albans that have certainly been involved in their fair share of battles against developments recently. There was about half hour of the meeting before Lawrence Eve stepped up to talk about other developments that they were battling and taking to the High Court. So that was a very comprehensive update from them. So there is going to be, even let alone the views of us as Saints fans and all Saints fans. There's been some discussion on the forum that's, if you want to go on there and see what some Saints fans are thinking already, but let alone us, developments as a whole. And that's one interesting thing about this for me, about it not being housing, is with it not being housing, that's great in some regards, but in terms of the pressures on the council to get housing and targets, etc., this road now they're going down for either a business park or a big old data centre. Certainly a lot of questions, I think, about that at the minute. And it's going to be an interesting path over the next year or so to see where it goes. And of course, City fans, if we're top of the Isthmian League by 100, well, not 100 points, by 10 points when this is all going on, maybe it won't be so many complaints. But if we're again struggling and on the pitch it's not looking great, or we're mid-table, etc., and we're not meeting what Saints fans expect, and we're consulting about moving to the 6,000 seat stadium, but it's not really in St Albans, barely, just about. There's going to be a lot of questions, isn't there, for the club and the ownership? So it's certainly a big year coming up, as you said, Lee.
Can I go and put a dinner on now?
I was going to say, do you think anyone's lasted this long?
I've got a closing gambit, if I may. A little bit of good news. Former club secretary Tom Norman. He's had a week. No. He's had a week, hasn't he?
Oh, no. Our
friend Thomas, dear good friend, who's now I think it's the assistant match secretary at Spurs. He's had a busy week. Yeah. I've been following his antics. He's been on the national press. He's been on the telly. I've seen some glorious pictures with him holding the UEFA Cup, as we would know it, Tabs, or Fairs Cup, or Europa League trophy, whatever. Fair play. Well done, Thomas. You worked extremely hard, my friend. And it's been a journey from when you and I had to paint the main stand with decade-old tins of paint. Well done, my friend. You had a very successful week. You've earned some rest, I've no doubt. And obviously, if you do want to come on to the pod, we will be more than happy to have you.
Talking of former City people, got one more chuck in there. Stuart Maynard, former City player, of course, 10 appearances, 2 goals, 11 games for the reserves. Of course, this week he was sacked by Notts County. Nice person, Stuart. So hopefully he's back in the game soon.
Well, that was a positive end. I will say, what on earth was Tom Norman doing on one of those open top buses going through Tottenham? What has Tom done to deserve that?
He's a man of the people, mate. He listens to the fans, mate. That's what he does.
I'm sure he misses giving us a lift to the likes of Chelmsford away and all that. Oh,
of course he does. Yeah. Absolutely.
But, yeah. Well, I think we're done.
Thank you for everyone who remarkably viewed the last pod. Over 1,000 hits, I believe. Mm-hmm. Must be a slow news day around the globe. But if you do want to get in touch, I'm not entirely sure how regularly we're going to hold these in the off season, but Tabs is driving this forward with the force of a Nova. So Jacob is going to give you all the contact information if you want to get in touch right now.
Yeah, Podful of Saints on Twitter, email description below. As Lee says, we'll be back soon enough. Once maybe a bit more news, actually, if we've got a playing squad at some point. Hopefully next episode we won't see Dave and Lee almost fall out. I was getting a bit worried then for a minute.
Oh, it's fine. Not for the first time, mate, Tabs.
It won't happen.
But we thank you all for watching. We really appreciate the support and listening, and I really appreciate it. So we'll speak to you all again very soon. I won't say come on, you Saints, because there's no game. So but we'll see you all again.
Sign some players.
Bye-bye.
Come on, Zane.